Right. So anyway, I put the body in the trunk, right? And then everybody's like, "Ooh, what's that smell?" So, oh, hey guys, welcome to the second episode of the Differently Wired show. I am your host, Max Derrat. Please ignore what you just heard the last 10 seconds. It's good to be with you all again. I'm so glad to see that you guys have shown up to join us. Saw a few of you were waiting before we started. That's nice to see. Before we get started, before we get into the main topics of the day and the mailbag questions and all that, I just want to, of course, introduce my co-host, as always, John Tucker. How you doing today?
Wonderful, thank you, Max.
Wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. Were you hit particularly badly by the snow that rolled in the last couple days?
No, not badly in my area. I live in Crystal Beach, Niagara region, and we got ice and it was cold, but the snow wasn't nearly as bad as what I hear people are getting around. So we're kind of lucky.
Oh, lucky you. we
Yeah.
apparently, like in our part of Ontario, I'm live in Canada. In case you guys couldn't tell by the accent and my frequent use of the word "about," but making it sound like a boot. We got hit with like the worst storm that we've had since 1998. Like apparently, schools in Ottawa were closed for the first time since that year. It's absolutely ridiculous. Backbreaking snow removal. Well, that's not true. I was using a snowblower. But anyways, you get the point. You get the point. All right. Anyways, before we get into the main stuff, I just want to do a couple of house cleaning stuff as always, right off the top. Obviously, if you guys haven't been listening to the last couple of episodes where we have been announcing this, I just want to draw you guys' attention to the fact that we do in fact have a Facebook page. If you see it on screen right now, and if you want to go and like this Facebook page, be up to date on when the show goes live, or if you want to suggest show topics, or you want to discuss the show or autism related subjects with people that listen to these videos, make sure you go to the Facebook page. There's a link in the description box below. And also, by popular demand, I've set up a Discord server. There we go. So, this is Discord. I'm sure a lot of you guys already know what this is. Went up for the first time, I think, a couple weeks ago, and at the moment, we're over 100 members. People have been very, very, very much enjoying the experience on Discord right now in our server. People have been helping each other out, giving each other advice in respect to autism, Asperger's, mental health related stuff. Been very, very positive so far. So I highly recommend you go and check that out. Also, it's in your best interest to join the Discord server, because if you like my videos and you want to see me do particular types of videos, you should see in the left-hand part of this window where it says, like all the text channels are, you see there it says video suggestions. If you have a particular video subject that you want me to do, just make sure you go to my Discord server and leave that suggestion in there. All right, with that out of the way, I just want to say hi to the people in the chat. I see you all there. Hey, Hayden. Hey, Flying. Hey, Hollabreen. Hey, Feldy. Hey, Jade. Hey, Taylor. Hey, Hate. Oh, yeah, you get the point. It's good to see you guys chatting in there. Everybody, please be civil. I know you are anyways, but just, saying that rhetorically. All right, that out of the way, let's get on to the main topic of the day. And this one is something that was obviously going to come about at some point, because this is something that, trolls and self-flagellating. No, wait, self-flagellating. Is that good or bad?
That's when monks beat themselves in the Middle Ages. So
Oh,
that's
that's bad.
kind of
Okay.
bad if you're doing it, right?
No, no, no. The word, sorry, the word I'm looking for is self-aggrandizing. Yeah,
Ah,
this is so. Anyways, let me start what I was saying again. This is a topic that was inevitably going to be talked about because it's frequently brought up by trolls and self-aggrandizing rationalists in my comment sections all the time. The fact that supposedly I'm using autism as an excuse. Either I don't really have autism and I'm using it as an excuse to not better my life or better myself, or I do have autism, but I'm just using it as a crutch so that I don't have to deal with the realities of everyday life. Now, when this idea to do this as a main topic came up to me, I sort of tried to think about the different types of people that would normally utter this phrase. And I'll just read them out quickly, and then, John, maybe you can add one or two other types of people that might say something like this, and then we'll just get into the topic in general. First of all, there are people that say this because they can't be bothered to empathize with somebody who isn't neurotypical. Now, this has happened to me all the time. People say that I'm just using it as an excuse because if they deny the diagnosis, they won't have to accept the fact that maybe if I'm telling the truth, that they're the ones being cruel, right? And it's understandable to do that from an instinctual level at first because autism, it's kind of a complicated subject. It's also like a lot of other different physiological and mental problems that somebody might have, where unless you actually have those problems, then it's really hard to wrap your head around it sometimes for some people, right? And I find that this tends to be the most common type of person in my comment sections whenever I've done my Asperger's videos. And they said something like this. They like to say this because they can't comprehend that this is actually something that's real. The second type of person are people that I just referred to as self-aggrandizing rationalists. They're people that just like being contrarian because they seize on a partial truth, which is yes, some people who have autism will use it as an excuse, and there are some people that don't really have autism, but they self-diagnose and use it as an excuse. And because of that reality, they'll completely delegitimize the realities of people that actually do have autism, right? So it's like if there's any potential doubt that could be cast upon something that you're trying to explain, then there's no reason they should accept it whatsoever, right? It's sort of go. This is sort of a a controversial example to use, but I'm going to use it anyways, just because it gets across the general point. Um, when I was recently in university, I was studying the Third Reich. There's actually a class where you could study the history of Nazi Germany. And one topic that was discussed in particular was Holocaust denial. Like why do people deny the Holocaust? Well, it's because like one thing that some of them do is that if there's one thing that can be where somebody can cast a little bit of doubt on something, then they can get people, altruistic people, people that are normally good people, to question the reality of the whole thing in general, right? So, for example, if somebody says uh, Hitler gassed 6 million Jews, that's actually not true. 3 million Jews were gassed, and 3 million Jews were killed outside of gas chambers, right? So people will, like Holocaust deniers and anti Semites, will say something like that to try and cast doubt over the whole story of the Holocaust in general, right? And like I said, it's a very touchy example, but I hope that by using it, you guys understand what I'm saying. It's sort of the same idea when it comes to denying that people have these mental problems. And those are a couple of the examples that I've cited so far. John, have you encountered people like that? Are there other types of people that you want to mention?
Well, actually, in families, we have that situation going on where mom doesn't believe that Junior has an issue,
Hmm.
which makes it difficult for him to remember to do the chores that he agreed last week he was going to remember to do, which are boring chores that don't hold his attention. And they think somehow it's kind of an excuse. He's lazy. He wants to play video games all day. And how come he's not mobilized to do this kind of stuff? It's just an excuse. So I'm always working with families to try to translate what's going on in the way that you have done. And it is a big issue between couples, between parents and kids. Um, I've come up lately with a real problem word in this regard, and it's called parenting.
Parenting?
Parenting. There's a lot of folk who think that parenting is a responsibility to make the kids behave. Now, Jordan Peterson says you can do that until they're about 4 years old.
Hmm.
After that, you got to negotiate and you got to treat them, like older persons. But if you got a guy who's 18 and you're trying to parent him, show him the true way, what you're doing is actually delegitimizing his position. You're making him feel small and bad and resentful. So where there is a misunderstanding, and using any of these neurodiverse things as an excuse, you will get people suspecting ulterior, nasty motives. Okay, all he wants to do is play video games. All he wants to do is hang out with his friends. He doesn't want to help with the dishes. What kind of a person is he going to be when he grows up? He won't help with he won't take out the garbage.
Hmm.
So they use these kinds of examples, in the same way that you use the self-aggrandizing people who find a portion of something true. It is true that Junior doesn't enjoy taking out the garbage, but that doesn't mean at 40 years old he's going to be an irresponsible lout and he won't accept responsibilities,
Mm.
especially if he chooses a career that interests his attention. So I see it in that kind of way. And I also see it in universities and schools with regard to accommodations. At some level, even the people with these challenges are sometimes embarrassed to ask for an accommodation.
Yeah.
So when they say, "Oh, I don't know if I should get this special help," I don't, I want to be treated like everyone. I say, "Okay, are you telling me that when you walk in the exam room, the professor should rip all the glasses off all the people because those glasses are an accommodation? They can see better because they have glasses. You want to take
Right.
away their glasses, right?"
Right.
The difference is with ADHD, with autism, is it's kind of invisible. Not entirely, but it kind of is invisible. So people expect you, well, you don't need glasses, you don't have any challenge with mobility, throw that cane away, you don't need it, walk like the rest of us. You got to see accommodations as being an evening and a leveling of the bar. But of course, you have to believe that it's a legitimate problem that people are facing anyway. So, the third point I'd like to make is that if you find yourself up against a denier, then there is a point at which it's useless to keep fighting with the
Right.
denier.
Absolutely.
You, you got to kind of say, okay, enough is enough. I'm wasting energy here. This person is going to keep with his self aggrandizing or his arguing or whatever. And you just got to say, let it go. Okay, you're toxic to me. Get out of my face or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, those I come across those types of people a lot, unfortunately. It's just there are people that are so committed to their standpoint that it's in everybody's best interest to just stop talking and just walk
Hmm.
away. Because
Hmm.
especially if you have autism and you're trying to convince somebody and they start retaliating and they're being insulting and maybe they get loud, it's just uncomfortable for everybody. Now, there's
Yeah.
one thing in particular that I want to bring up that I think is important that like some of these critics might blame me for not bringing up if I don't. Um, the, the fact of the matter is, sometimes they're right. There's sometimes people that do use autism as an excuse. But there are ways around this where both, well, the most important thing is that the person who has autism is satisfied with themselves and their efforts and not the other person. But there is a way where you can use autism in a way where it's not an excuse, but it's more so an explanation. And by using that explanation, you can become more productive and show that you're not using it as an excuse. So, for example, I wrote this down. An example of using autism as an excuse would be like, oh, there's a social event that's going on. There's a social gathering. Maybe it's for family, maybe it's for friends, maybe there's a party, and you don't go and you say, oh, I don't want to go because I have autism and a symptom of that is social anxiety. Now, that you might have social anxiety, you might have really bad social anxiety, but the fact of the matter is, there's going to be times in your life where you do have to interact with another human being. It's just the way that the majority of society has been built up because the majority of human beings are neurotypicals rather than neuroatypicals. So what you would do is instead of using that as an excuse, you would try your best to go to a social gathering and then try to, when you're talking to somebody, if one of your quirks or your symptoms arises, like you can't really look them in the eye, or maybe you speak with one tone while you're talking to them, or I don't know, you're very particularly focused on one topic that's of interest to you and not of interest to them. If you get the feeling that maybe this is something that's happening, or if they give the impression that they find something is off about you, use that as an opportunity to educate them. And you might think, oh, well, they probably won't care. They probably just find that boring. No, no, no. See, what's great about the society that we live in today is people tend to be a lot more accepting once you demonstrate that you're being completely human with them, you're not lying to them, and that this is something that you dealt with a long time. People tend to be very receptive. And if they're not receptive, then they're just not worth your time, right? Um, and one other thing I want to add on to that is like, okay, let's say your social anxiety is bad enough where you could almost use it as an excuse and get away with it, right? Still, what you should try to do for yourself is try to set up incremental goals where you can push your limits and see how far you can go, where autism isn't a limit to you. See how far you can go, and then see where you actually do reach your limits. So, for example, let's say you really hate going out to social events and you avoid them at every possible turn. Well, maybe what you could try once is go to a social event, stick around for 5 minutes, maybe interact with one person, and then go home and consider that a success. Then, once you realize that you're able to get through that, and you didn't die from an anxiety attack or a panic attack, then you can try going to another social gathering. Try to strike up a conversation with somebody and see if it can last more than 2 minutes. And then, if that works, then you go home. That's a better success. And then you just increase things incrementally from beyond that point and see where you can go. Now, obviously, this particular method might not work. Maybe you need to use medication or something like that on top of that to alleviate your symptoms. But understand that there's a lot of different ways that you can approach something like this. And actually, you just mentioned Jordan Peterson. I think what I just explained is something that also that he's explained, if I'm not mistaken. You're reading his book now, right?
I am.
Yeah. In case you guys don't know, Jordan Peterson, he's a famous clinical psychologist who talks about this stuff a lot. I'm sure if you watch my channel for any period of time, you've heard of him. Yeah. Also, John, I wanted to ask you, you sort of alluded to this when you first started talking. How often is this a problem with people that come to you looking to be your client?
Which problem are you
The
meaning?
the problem that that they're, let's say a child or even an adult comes to you and they say, "Oh, my caretaker or my girlfriend or my parents think I'm using it as an excuse or that I really don't have it." How often is that a problem?
Almost all the time.
Oh, jeez. Yeah.
Almost all the time. And it is not a respecter of social status or intelligence or career. I've seen this problem with professionals of all sorts where they're in a situation where it's a problem, where people are not quite as professional. I sometimes have to advocate for somebody to their family, to their school, to their physician, because it's a huge, huge problem. And we have physicians who don't quite get that either, who, you know, they would see certain types of autism as very clearly pronounced, but others maybe not so much. So yeah, maybe not 100%, but boy, I'm trying to think of an exception. I really can't think of an exception where it was absolutely no problem.
Yeah, I suppose it just goes back to a human being's natural instinct to just ostracize and demonize anything they don't understand, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
pretty much.
You tend to be comfortable with things that are just like you. And if they're different from you, you're sort of saying, "Oh, that's different. I'm not sure. I don't know if I can trust that." Oh, it's very different. Oh, I'm afraid of that. I
Mhm.
better shoot it. Like this
Well,
animal. I should kill it because I don't know what it's going to do.
are you speaking from
So
experience, John? Like somebody saying they want to shoot their kid?
no, but I no, but I know people who have done that. As hunters,
Yeah,
where they will shoot something and then see, oh my God, I didn't mean to kill that one. You know, oh, maybe I'll throw it under the bushes or something. Now, I don't think too many people shoot their kids for that. I'm not sure. I haven't had much experience with that. Uh, but they kind of figuratively do that.
sure.
When you say to your kid, you're not going to amount to much. Why can't you be like your sister or your brother?
Mm,
And how come every year the teacher keeps telling me, you're smart, you could try harder? Why don't you better? You're embarrassing me. I
yeah.
don't know if there's not a lot of difference between that talk and some violent activity. That's pretty violent.
Yeah, it's like you were saying before, how it's very demeaning and it makes the person feel very resentful because the fact
Yeah,
that they feel like they have this problem and there's no way they can overcome it, that can really it can make them violent.
yeah,
Yeah, I know. I'm
yeah,
speaking from experience.
yeah. It can make them violent, of course,
Yeah.
and it quite often does, especially with teenage boys.
Mm. Yeah.
Who are being told to behave, behave, shut up, sit down, behave. and eventually that doesn't work
Yeah.
anymore. It gets to be pretty messy.
And also, yeah, it also doesn't help that, the way that the modern school system is set up. It's where you have to sit down at a desk for 6 hours straight when you're a young kid and try your best to pay attention. It doesn't work out as best for boys.
No, it's actually a well institutionalized kind of torture chamber.
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, I can agree. I have. If you guys want some horror stories in regards to that, check out the seventh episode of my Truth About Asperger's Syndrome series. Um, I'm just going to wrap this up because we got some questions to go through, and then we have a new segment that we're going to introduce. For people that might be having this problem in their own lives, any of the people that are listening right now, live or afterwards, the one thing that I found works the best when it comes to people that shout this phrase at you is to demonstrate to them, look, if you give me just a little bit of understanding, just understand that what I'm telling you is the truth. If you can help me get the support that I need, then you will be blown away about the effort that I will put into bettering myself and bettering my own life. And trust me, use if you want to convince them, show them some of my videos and use me as an example. Once I started getting support for the problems that I had with autism, my parents, who used to be this exact same type of person, where they would say, "Oh, stop using Asperger's as a crutch to not do anything." Um, Once I got the support that I needed, they've seen how successful I've been in respect to getting a job, having a girlfriend, doing my YouTube channel, which, by the way, just a second ago crossed 29,000 subscribers. Go me. Um, just you need to prove that to them, right? And I know that that's exactly what a lot of people are feeling, especially because a lot of the people that have AS tend to have their experiences mirrored in the lives of so many others. Anyways, thanks for listening to us talk about that. We're going to move on to the mailbag segment of this show. Now, what is the mailbag segment of the show? Well, every week we get emails from you guys asking us to talk about certain things, whether it's looking for advice in regards to personal problems or just asking us to speak generally about a topic. You guys send in the emails to this email address that you see on screen, and you guys can email us anytime if you have a particular question related to autism or even mental health. Email me at maxderrat@yahoo.ca and try to get your question on the show. Or if you want to try and get a live question, like if you want to submit a question right now, if you're listening to us live, go to Twitter and use the hashtag differentlywired, and we'll try to save some time at the end of the show to answer a couple of those questions. Now, if you want to ensure, if you're listening live right now, that your question gets answered on this live show, use the super chat function, which you should see at the very bottom of the live chat. Now, with that out of the way, let's get to the first question. And the first question comes to us from Nicholas. And Nicholas, I'm just going to let you and everybody know right now, I had to cut down your email just because it was too long, but I kept the most important parts in there, like your question. And in regards to anybody else that sends us emails in the future, please do your best. Like, I really appreciate the heartfelt emails. I read them through all the way, and I do my best to respond to all of them. But if you want to get them on the show, the best way to do so is to make sure you keep them relatively short. All right. Anyways, Nicholas writes, I found that comedy was the Rosetta Stone to translate emotion and causes. Evoking emotions in others allowed me to both know what they felt, what I felt, and why I felt it. Something previously unattainable. In comedy, having low vocal range and not demonstrating empathy allows for a natural deadpan delivery that people respond to positively, and many comics actually strive for. Prior to this breakthrough, my social interaction was minimized. Every school was crude understanding of expectations and meeting those expectations. Teachers wanted perfect scores, so I earned them. It took me years to finally understand that stated expectations and actual expectations are incongruous. In high school, for example, earning perfect scores in every class drew undesired attention, negative and positive responses from teachers and peers, and the process of minimizing undesired social interaction was actually to score average. Aside from standardized tests, which I found enjoyable, a quiet classroom with clear expectations was a relief. I have some concerns for future generations of students on the spectrum as education moves towards an active learning style environment, which gives an advantage to neurotypical students through group work and active discussion, rather than large groups with a lecture format. In education, but I know if systems like that had been in place for me, school would have been even more of a nightmare. Determining expectations of behavior is one of the most difficult things for me, and I would imagine other people on the spectrum, though I can't speak for them. And comedy is about subverting expectations. If meeting expectations doesn't come naturally, subverting them just may. I would suggest anyone with AS who wants to step out. Bless you. I would suggest anyone with AS who wants to step out of their comfort zone in an attempt to better understand themselves or their friends or peers to give comedy a try. I like the premeditated nature of stand up more so than improvisational comedy, but I've got one friend who is also on the spectrum who feels the exact opposite. Is comedy something you would ever try or have tried in the past? Thanks again for creating the content that you do. It's both enlightening to see how others on the spectrum cope with society and find a niche therein to feel comfortable, or at least uncomfortable to an acceptable level. I look forward to seeing your future content and hope to discuss more with you about AS, life, and this human experience we're all afflicted with. Well, thank you very much for sending that in, Nicholas. I got two words for you. Stephen Wright. John, do you know who Stephen Wright is?
No, don't.
No, you never heard of Stephen Wright? Oh, okay.
I may have, but I may have forgotten. Sorry.
Okay, he's one of, in my opinion, the best comedians ever. He's probably my favorite comedian, and just like Nicholas says, he speaks at a very like low tone, deadpan delivery, and it's some of the funniest stuff ever. Like I'll give you an example of one of his jokes, and I'll try to deliver it like he would. When I was a little kid, I wish the first word I ever said was quote, so right before I died, I could say end quote. I got a postcard from my friend George. It was a satellite picture of the entire Earth. On the back, he wrote, "Wish you were here." And he just does this for 40 minutes straight. And he has, I'm not doing him any justice. He has the best voice, and he does this all the time. Thankfully, my dad introduced me to Stephen Wright at a very young age. And so I adopted his style of comedy as a young kid, because as a young kid I really didn't know how to socialize, and going into high school and stuff like that, I didn't know really how to uh, get friends in a traditional way. So I found that the best way that I could do that was embrace the quirks that I had, and be somewhat of a comedian in that way. So here's a good example, and John, you'll get a kick out of this. Often what I would do is I would tell people the most ridiculous, outlandish story, saying like a story from my life that never actually happened, and see if I can convince them that it actually happened. So, for example, when I was in grade 12 law and we were doing group work, and the group work I think was centered around the rights of religious organizations. And naturally, because you're a teenager and you're talking about some of the more outlandish organizations like Scientology and Zoroastrianism, some of the kids were making fun of the Jehovah Witnesses. And I remember speaking up at that time and being like, guys, I really would appreciate if you don't make fun of the Jehovah Witnesses. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Are you a Jehovah Witness? And I said, no, actually, I'm a part of a subordinate organization of the Jehovah Witnesses. And they're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, have you ever heard of the Jehovah Witness Protection Program? And I'm like, no, what's that? And I said, well, it's unfortunately, because the Jehovah Witnesses go door to door, oftentimes they're met with very, very violent people from time to time. So we go to door pretending that we're somebody that we're not, that we're the Jehovah Witnesses. And our policy is that for every bullet that we take, the organization gets $100. Right? I said something like that, and half of the people that I was speaking to believed me. They believed me. Sorry?
That's the funniest part of. That's the funniest part.
I know. So it's like there's times where it's like, oh, I have AS and people aren't ever going to find me funny because I don't know how to be sociable or stuff like that. No. There's avenues where you can pursue this. That's one way that I did it. And of course I would tell them afterwards, and they would have such a good laugh because it's like, dude, you have the best delivery, right? And guys, if you could find a way to embrace this, I really highly recommend it because it worked well for me. One way that you can start is just look up Stephen Wright on YouTube. That's Steven space WRIGHT, and just pay attention to his mannerisms and see how well you can adopt them. Because I promise you, as somebody who's very socially awkward and very much hates social situations, it has worked best for me. John, do you have anything to say on the subject of comedy?
Not comedy so much as acting generally, comedy as a subset. As I was listening to you read, it suddenly occurred to me that I've had several clients who've been involved in portraying themselves as somebody they are not
Yes.
in an acting role and feel much more comfortable projecting into that role because they don't have to explain themselves. They can be this other persona. And I believe it gives them a kind of a busman's holiday from worry. It allows them to live a vicarious other existence so that they can throw themselves in. I see that quite a lot. And I'm beginning to see now why it would be very helpful
Yeah,
to
it
allow you to explore language and activities that in your own person you might be a little nervous about. Okay, well, I'll try it as this other person. It's like, you know how when you're a little kid and you go out trick or treating, you can say stuff and do stuff that you'd never do. Otherwise, you can be this whatever character or creature and act out the character creature role, and you're hidden. You have a mask. The mask protects you.
mhm.
So I'm beginning to see something like that about acting and comedy specifically. So anyway,
Yeah, John,
that's a good little.
you're absolutely right. Before we move on, I just wanted to reiterate something that I said a number of times in our past episodes. Drama classes. Anybody
Mm,
who has ever asked me about, how do I overcome my social anxiety and be more sociable, the one thing that I always recommend is drama classes. Because when I was in high school, I took drama for 4 years, and nothing has helped me more to be able to overcome my anxiety in social situations than doing that. Now, it might sound very intimidating at first, to be in a room full of people, and uh, the whole purpose of it is to socialize with people. Don't worry. As soon as you start, the teachers and everybody else there recognizes that some people might have a hard time coming out of their shell at first. They make you very relaxed. You play games at first. Um, and once you start to realize, hey, everybody's sort of somewhat in the same boat, you can become relaxed, and then you can do things that you never thought were possible.
mm.
Anyways, let's move on to the next question. And this question comes to us from Jeremy. Uh, Jeremy spoke. Okay. Hello, Max. Thank you for responding to the questions on your first Differently Wired video. No problem, dude. It really meant a lot to me, and I was grateful to see you wanted to answer my questions. Well, hey, dude, if I'll answer anybody's question, just make sure you send it in. It's an honor that you guys would take the time to do so. I'm currently a college student majoring in physics at a large public university. When I first came in my first semester, I quickly felt bogged down and depressed and really started to hate the indifference of my peers, as well as my parents displayed in regards to my struggles in adjusting to a college campus. I did a little research on my own, and it turns out I wasn't alone. It turns out that most students on the autism spectrum disorder either drop out or are flunked from universities at an alarming rate. So, my question for you is, why do you think this is an epidemic, and what can be done to solve this problem? Thank you for your time, Max. I'm just going to get a sip of water. John, I'm sure you're completely familiar with something like this.
Yeah, actually, my target audience when I started coaching is folks who are having trouble with diversity, and that's what I did my PhD thesis on, from high school to post-secondary institutions, because that's the time when your neuro not typical characteristics give you the most trouble. Because here in high school, regardless of how high school is conducted, you tend to get stuff handed to you in such a way that if you learn this stuff, you got it. And then you flick over to an institution that is a lot less caring normally and has a lot larger audience that it's teaching. So suddenly you're in a much bigger pond and struggling. So, especially first year, but really all along the years, it's a big problem. Um, some writers say that we're living in a kind of an ADHD world where there are so many distractions and so many things that keep people from being able to concentrate that it seems like there's more of it. Well, it may be that there are certain characteristics that you might have with your mind that are aggravated by being in crowded shopping malls, by being in disco dance, large, you know, bustling crowds and situations. Um, the it is an alarming rate, and I'm hearing some alarming stuff about some of the post-secondary institutions' inability to find time to even meet with in a efficient way the people that have questions about their accommodations or worries about exams and stuff. So yeah, it is a big problem. Um, when you're a student, you have to gather the tools to advocate for yourself. You really do have to learn how to advocate for yourself. Some of the student accessibility centers preach that as a model, but whether they do or not, you really can't wait and allow the system to look after you. It won't actually do that. So you use whatever resources you can, get whatever help you can, use the tutors when you can, use the office hours that are posted, grab every office hour, grab every kind of help that you can, but you still, at the end of the day, you're the one who's going to have to look after yourself.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part of it. But trust me, guys, like once you reach out to at least one person, it could be your parent or family or just a confidant or even somebody at school that you trust. Just make sure that you have somebody that's looking after you because, like John was alluding to, once you leave secondary school and go to post secondary, a lot of things change. You know, if people have AS and one of the main symptoms is they really need routine, there's nothing more life or earth shattering than going to post secondary, at least at that point in your life. You know, you have new responsibilities. You gotta, if you grew up having, your parents cook your meals, you gotta cook your own meals. If you had a hard time socializing prior to college or university, it's paramount that you start doing something like that along those lines when you get to university. So if you have these problems, you got to tell somebody about them, and then you can set out a plan. Both of you can set out a plan to have these problems sorted for you. There's lots of different resources that are available to you. Even if you can't see somebody like a therapist that's on campus at the time, you can get certain supports. Like for example, at my former university, I went to this segment on my campus called the Access Center, and they gave me certain benefits like being able to submit my assignments at a later time, give me extra time on exams, give me a special room where I don't have any auditory or visual distractions, where the light isn't too bright or something like that. There's a lot of different examples. And if you are somebody like Jeremy, that is having these types of troubles and want these specific types of resources, make sure to email me and I'll do my best to help you where I can. Okay, we have one more email and then we're going to go into the new segment of the show. And this email comes to us from Jake. And Jake writes, okay, Max, so I've got a problem involving telling my parents on a possibility of Asperger's syndrome. I'm 14 and I can't and won't get a diagnosis on my own accord, so they are the only people I can go to for a diagnosis. A diagnosis would help me loads. It would certainly give me resources to help me to cope and live, which I currently get none of. The problem is, I can't speak to my parents. There's such a mental barrier I've built up against them. This is because of their misconceptions for autism and disregard for such disability. They simply want me to be a model of themselves, which isn't possible when you have Asperger's syndrome. I want to tell them I have Asperger's syndrome and feel safe and have the smallest possibility of a denial/rejection or at worst a humiliation, which occurred once when I mentioned autism in a conversation with my mother. It's kind of deterred me to do anything ever since. Could you discuss some techniques/ideas/solutions to informing my parents of my possibility of Asperger's syndrome whilst addressing the issues of what might be narcissistic parents? Correct me if I'm wrong. And also giving me some methods to talk to them in a calm but serious manner. Thanks. Well, thank you, Jake. Yeah, it's like this entire email just summarizes everything we were talking about for the last half hour. Here's what I would suggest: make a list of the various symptoms that go along with AS. Make sure you make a list of the ones that apply to you. Not all of them will, but I'm sure if you're you're being honest with yourself and with us, that you are telling the truth. Make sure you select the ones that do apply to you and those that don't. And then think of the circumstances from your life that demonstrate those symptoms. Obviously, ones that your parents were witness to would be of greater benefit. And then the more you compile them together, the better you make your case, right? And then present these particular circumstances to your parents, and then emphasize that you want to seek out a diagnosis because of these circumstances. And the most important thing that you need to get across to them when you tell them about this is that you don't want a diagnosis because you want to hone victimhood and you want the benefits to come along with victimhood, but it's because you want to do better and you want to have a better life for yourself, right? And hopefully that will get you help you gain some ground. And if that doesn't work, I'll just I'm not trying to be selfish and self-promotional. I'm just saying this because it's what people have been telling me. Share one or two of my videos with them, right? Because the type of comment that I normally get on those types of videos is from people. They're saying that it's like I'm explaining their entire life. And if you tell them that, and you tell them, hey, I identify with a lot of what this guy says too, can you please just maybe just entertain at least the idea of me trying to get a diagnosis and see where that gets you? John, anything you want to add on top of that?
Well, the first thing that I had in mind was that what you said already is that you should share your Max's videos. Another couple of thoughts occur to me, and that is there may be someone you can enlist as an ally, like a friend that hangs around the house, if no friend, and a cousin or some family member who will help you. Now, I'm not saying you tell them what to do, but talk to them about strategies for getting the parents on side. A third thing that occurred to me is that you could call Carrie's Place, which is a very good resource for autism, who may have some ideas, courses, videos, things. But actually, another thing occurs to me as I'm saying that you have to stop asking their permission to have Asperger's.
Mm,
You can actually announce that that's what you think you have, or act like you have it and take steps to find the resources for yourself. Obviously, a diagnosis would help, but if you need their permission to have the diagnosis, it's going to be a kind of a psychological barrier. You just let them know, I got it. You can let me suffer, or you can help me.
yeah, it's
You know
like
what I mean? It's a kind of a
it's like what John McClane says to that one guy in Die Hard. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. Quit being a part of the problem. Um,
yeah.
yeah. Uh, anyways, we have to move on to the next segment because we're running somewhat out of the time. And this is our new segment that John and I were talking. I'm not sure if we mentioned this publicly on one of the last
Don't
episodes.
think we did
No, I
actually.
didn't. Okay. Well, guys, I just want to let you know about this really cool experiment that we're going to attempt. Take a look at the screen. Yes, we're going to try and take calls from people. We're going to try and bring people onto the live stream with us. And the way that we're going to do this from now on is by bringing people on that ask to be on the show from Discord. So if you want to go into the description box of this live stream right now or any of the other differently wired videos, go into the description box and look for the Discord link. Join the Discord, message me directly, or message me by tagging me in one of the posts in one of the main text channels, and we'll try to bring you on the show. Now, with that out of the way, we actually do have somebody on the line that has been muted and waiting patiently for the last 40 minutes, and he is Josh from Britain. Josh, you're live now. Say hello.
Hello,
Yep, can everybody hear Josh?
I am
I can
myself.
hear you fine.
Yeah, we can hear
Hi,
you, man.
Josh.
Yeah. Well, I can hear you back, so I guess that's all that matters.
Yep. So, how you doing today, Josh? What did you want to talk about?
Right, Max. Right, John. Well, I wrote in weeks back, and well, John, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with regards to my question. Because you mentioned that Max had normalized his Asperger's, you
hmm
know, and obviously, you obviously, as I said, up to that point, obviously, I've been living great.
Hmm.
So obviously, I have to ask, what would you say a good strategy? In order to be able to say, I have, I have this condition. So what? As opposed to being a perennial skeleton in my closet.
I guess you're going to have to open the closet door.
Hmm.
Well, that
And
I do admit I have been doing recently.
well,
Um,
that's the first step. And what you have to realize is that you've had a life of being used to the skeleton in the closet. Now, when you open the door and you announce, okay, do you know, folks, I have these characteristics that are caused by Asperger's. You have started a process that is just begun, and it will take you a while to get used to saying it. It might take you months and months and months or years to be absolutely comfortable saying, well, this is just my characteristic. I'm an SP. So what do you want to do? Shoot me. It might take a while for it to become normalized. So you need to be patient with yourself about how quickly you become to the new view of yourself. So, in other words, instead of being ashamed of how slow you are at getting rid of shame, you got to kind of say, hey, I've done pretty good. I'm starting to loosen up. So you kind of celebrate your small victories as you move along. I kind of see it as a going from a position that's a deficit position to a stronger position, but it will take a little time. You have
Hmm.
to be patient with yourself.
Well, that's certainly much. That advice is certainly much appreciated. It's how can I put? Think of the best way to word this now.
Yeah, take your time, man.
Um, um, yeah, it is definitely. I mean, I'd say it's definitely neither. It's something I addressed. I'd say that my attitude towards it is something that I guess you might say. All right, I'm a big nerd for Carl Jung. I'd
Oh,
say
dude, me
it's something.
too.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I'd say my attitude towards it is, I'd say it's one that was forged in isolation because it wasn't really until I'd say about this year when it finally hit the nail on the it finally hit me that I'm not alone. For a long time I did think I was the only person with it or the only person I knew of. Certainly, it's not then when I realized that and how how I could act, that was how I could act in spite of it. That was something, I'm telling you.
Mhm.
Well, I would celebrate your sense in keeping yourself undercover when you had to protect yourself. That phase was probably wise because you weren't ready psychologically to face all the slings and arrows of outrageous rejection that you would get when you weren't ready to do that. Now you've come to new realizations. Hey, this is just the way my brain is wired, like thousands and thousands of other people. Maybe I'll just learn to live with that and then move beyond feeling sorry for myself or worried. And I'll say, oh no, wait, no, I can replace worry and angst with like hope and possibility and a future that's going to have more things in it that suit me and I don't have to hide from stuff.
Mhm. And it takes a while to do that, dude. Like,
Hmm.
don't feel bad if it takes you a while to figure out a way to accept it. Like even nowadays, while I'm doing this and I see like all the troubles that people are going in with in regards to having AS, it kind of makes you reflect on your own deficiencies and wonder how you can overcome them. But it's a gradual process. One way, obviously, that I found a way to make peace with my symptoms and turn them into a positive is by doing YouTube, right? Like you mentioned Carl Jung. I recently did a video on his book Answer to Job. Well, not really a book, it's like 100 pages long, but that was a positive experience for me because it allowed me to study, allowed me to flex my brain, and allowed me to put the fact that I have above average intelligence, as a lot of people with AS do, to good work. Now, maybe like you just told me that you're a fan of Carl Jung. Is there, like, aside from reading the books, have you expressed your love of Carl Jung to other people? Have you done anything with it
Amid
beyond reading? Yep.
amidst others, obviously, that's actually no about a foot and a half away from me is actually a copy of Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Oh, right on.
Ah,
Not Jung, but
Yeah.
Nietzsche, but still a good book.
Oh yeah, definitely beyond all doubt.
Hmm.
And and obviously, you mentioned Frankel's Man's Search for Meaning, which of course was on the to read list. Although you're mentioning quickly,
JBP, yeah.
yeah. Oh
Jordan
yeah, yeah.
Peterson.
I've read 12 Rules for Life as well.
Mm. John's in the middle
Yeah,
of that right now.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just
it's
started a little while ago.
it's if I had to describe that book, I'd say yeah, definitely got something in it, to say the least.
Mm. Yeah, well, one thing that you were just like the main crux of why you wanted to come on today was to try and figure out how to overcome, hating yourself for having AS. Well, one thing that you can do that found has worked for me, like you just said, Jordan Peterson, he's really hot right now. If you're reading like all the books that he's recommending by Nietzsche and Carl Jung, maybe you can find a way to put that out so that you can engage with other people that share the same liking. Like for example, I did Notes from Underground, which is another book that he recommended, and I did a video on that. What I did after I did it was I shared it with a whole bunch of Facebook groups where people like to discuss Jordan Peterson's ideas, and they came to the video and they and we just talked about the stuff that we loved. Now, you don't necessarily have to do videos, although it's something that I would recommend, but maybe you could seek out like a book club or something. There's stuff that you can do like that online or in person if you're up to doing that type of social gathering where
Yeah,
people.
Josh is yeah a book club. Max is an excellent point. But Josh, how do you feel about that? Like a small group of people talking about those ideas that you love to talk about.
It's certainly a possibility, although in addition to well, literature, obviously, I guess my biggest passion in life is really music. So
Hmm.
obviously,
Okay.
you mentioning trying to pursue something worth meaning. Once that's something that I've really been doubling down on because I guess like most of the music, it for me feels like I have no choice. This is how I am. I must make music.
Then
You
it's
know,
good to embrace. It's good to embrace that.
Yeah.
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 Although the sort of music I like is even that's within a very niche market.
Hey,
that being that being death metal, of course.
oh, are you like a lead singer? Like, what do you play?
I'm I play guitar and I'm currently learning how to sing.
Oh, those deep growly vocals on.
that
Ah,
sort of
okay.
yeah.
Well, you're on your way. You can do better than I can. What is it like? Cannibal Corpse, that type of
Cannibal
stuff.
Corpse, Cannibal Corpse, Death Obituary. You've pretty much you've got it.
Awesome. Yeah. I can't say that's my type of music, but I feel you when it comes to like niche markets. I'm into like alternative bands, bands like Our Lady Peace, The Tea Party, bands that very few people have ever heard of. Although I do resist all the temptations to turn into a hipster. So, guys, don't worry about that. But before we have to let you go, Josh, because we're about to finish the show, I just want to say, like music, going back to what Nicholas was saying about comedy, music is something that helped me a lot too. Because when I was trying to appeal to other people to show them that I'm worth their time, instead of talking to them, I would just whip out a guitar. That was what I was known for in high school all the time. I was always the guy with the guitar and I was always playing it, right? People come up to me and ask me to play certain songs, and then we strike up very simple conversations. So if you're good at music, and you can find an avenue where you can play in front of lots of people and they can come up to you and you're like, hey, you're a really good guitar player. That's a way that you can create a positive identity for yourself. Because people with AS tend to be naturally predisposed to being good with music. Just a thought.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I would say at this present moment, trying to work towards because, as I said, I feel like I have instinctually no choice. Guess that would be the nearest way I can articulate it.
mhm. Well,
Yeah, it's
it could be either that, or if music doesn't work out, you could try, the expertise that you have in regards to reading like really complicated material from Jung and Nietzsche. But it all goes back to what I was saying about look, overcoming your frustration with your symptoms. It takes a long time, and
Hmm.
obviously this call isn't going to solve everything. So I encourage you. It's, you're a part of the Discord. Feel free to message me anytime or talk to anybody else in the chat that might be going through the same stuff as you. We're all here to support each other. Okay.
that's much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. And Josh, thanks so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we can do it again in the future. Okay.
Thank you, Josh.
It's been a pleasure talking to you two fine gentlemen as well.
All right. God save the Queen. Love Britain.
God save the Queen, pinkies out, what, and yes.
Would you like some tea, Winston Churchill? I would, because I'm Winston Churchill. Family Guy reference. All right. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you later. Okay, Josh?
Thank you.
All right. Have
Thank
a
you
good
for
night.
having me.
It was our pleasure.
Likewise.
All right. Have a good night. Bye bye.
Same to you, John, as well. Have a good evening.
You're welcome. Good evening.
All right. So we have a few minutes left. Thanks so much, Josh. We have one super chat that was sent in to us by Robert Evans. He sends in $20. Dude, thank you so much for doing that. He says, I've read some arguments that people on the spectrum have a different type of self consciousness. We intellectualize, not intuit. And many of us might not achieve self actualization. What are your thoughts on this? I hold on. I need to read that again. Did you get that, John?
It's a sophisticated question, but I sort of get it. I know what he means. It's part and parcel of not reading social symptom signs, not picking up social signals, I should say. I remember my first Asperger's client was someone who, after I knew him for a few months, I could read his signals, but otherwise he sounded deadpan and monotone in his presentation. So it seemed like he was kind of monitor. So I phoned a friend of mine who was a coach, and I said, "Listen, what's the difference between clients with Asperger's and clients with ADHD?" She said, "Well, the ADHD guys are, frustrated and confused, and you have to help them get organized. The Asperger's guys are always on the verge of firing you because they're thinking about all the things and various things about uh, what does this mean, and they kind of need to intellectualize. They need to see things in an almost scientifically pure, logical, and thorough way because they don't have that other kind of what Kahneman calls system one thinking, the
Mm,
intuition, the gut stuff honed. Like they they need to go into the cerebral stuff in order to get their messages clear. It kind of reminds me of that show Monk on TV, OCD and so on.
mm.
That guy who has to use many words and thoroughly understand something because there's no kind of residue of pooled understandings. So I think the question is a good question, and I kind of agree with the tenant of it.
Yeah, reading it again, yeah, that is what he is saying, and you answered it pretty sufficiently, John. I suppose that we do have some form of higher consciousness because we tend to focus on things that aren't superficial. Like we don't like
Yep.
you won't find a lot of people who have AS that like talking about what happened on Jersey Shore the other night. Is Jersey Shore still around?
No.
Please don't answer that question. Uh, I really don't want to know. I'm just joking. But yeah, I suppose there's some merit to that. Going back to what Carl Jung, which was just recently brought up. Yeah, to Carl Jung, he thought that a way to achieve a higher form of consciousness was by integrating unconscious elements with conscious elements. And if you have AS and you're constantly considering things all the time and you're always beating yourself up about things that you would rather be unconscious, things like the negative symptoms of having AS, having those swirl around in your brain all the time, it would naturally lead to some very unique form of consciousness. I don't know if it's a higher form of consciousness. I could be romantic about it and say it is, but I don't know. It's definitely a very unique form of consciousness. Thanks very much for sending that in. Who sent that in? Robert Evans. Thank you, Robert Evans. You're the man. All right. We just have a couple minutes left. I'm just going to answer a couple of quick Twitter questions. Jeffrey Sandlin says, just started listening to back catalog of the cast. Great stuff. Thanks, Jeffrey. As a lifelong gamer, I'm curious about your experiences with different game genres and difficulty. Well, I'll just take this very quickly, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting. My usual type of game, I could say that there are certain types of games that I would never play because I suppose this goes back to people with AS wanting routine and familiarity. I would never play a real-time strategy game. I don't like those online card games. I don't like turn-based games for the most part, except for Pokemon. Um, but aside from that, if I really, really like a game, I'll play it on the hardest difficulty. Like Metal Gear Solid 2, I've played that through on extreme and gotten the big boss emblem. Kudos to anybody who knows or who understands what I mean by that. It was a pain in the ass, but it was a real accomplishment in my life. As I brush off my shoulder. Anyways, one more question, and then we'll call it a day. Nathan Petrangelo says, not a question. Oh, okay. Not a question, but still important nonetheless. In my experience, when someone uses any disability as an excuse, it's because they've internalized it as permanent and unchanging. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, it's that's one trap that people who have AS or a form of mental illness can easily get themselves caught into. It's the fact that, oh, I'm stuck with this forever and there's nothing that I can do. I've accepted what's the medical term? It's accepting your doom, or I don't know what it is. There's a medical term for it, but I can't pick it up off the top of my head. But yeah, the whole point is that if there's somebody doing that and they say you're using it as an excuse, that's the one circumstance where it's actually true. But in that circumstance, I would shy away from shaming them, because after all, if they have these problems, they're probably going through a lot. If they've completely allowed it to control their life. If you see somebody like this and they're going through these issues, find ways to try and help them out of it. Try to get them to open up. Use any of the suggestions that we've talked about on in any of our Differently Wired episodes. John, anything you want to add before we close out?
No, I think we've had a great show and closed it out very nicely.
Awesome. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Oh, sorry?
Nothing to add.
Okay, sorry. Discord was just cutting out there for a second. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Differently Wired podcast. It's been great. I'm so. The reason why we haven't had very many or any technical issues this episode is because we went to the promised land of Discord, which I know sounds like an oxymoron, but it's really not. It's so much better than Skype and so much better than paying for Zoom. And hopefully we can continue on like this forever. Well, forever, relatively. You get the point. Without any technical issues. Oh, very quickly before we finish, Point Curation just sent a super chat at $2. Thank you very much. And he said, just caught this good series. You're the man, Point Curation. You're the man. All right. Finally, before we close out, I just want to thank John, as always, for doing the show with me. Great help, as always. And
it is my honor and pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's my honor and pleasure too, man. And finally, before we close out, I just want to remind people that if you want to send in a question and have it read on the show, let me move. OBS is great, but it doesn't really flow as scenically as I would want to. But anyways, if you want to have a question read out on the show, make sure you email us anytime. We're staying on top of everybody's email questions pretty well, actually. I'm surprised. So please send them in by using the email that you see on screen right now, which is maxderrat@yahoo.ca. And hopefully we'll see you then. And also, finally, in regards to supporting the show, financially or not financially, there's a couple of options available. Right now, we're just sticking with PayPal, although we're looking to do something Patreon-esque in the future, not using Patreon, but a website like it. But right now, if you want to support us financially, there's a PayPal link in the description box below. We've gotten a couple of donations from people. Thank you so much for those who sent them in. Although, if you're not able to support us financially, I totally understand. But if you still want to help the show, the most important thing that you guys can do, and I see there's a bunch of you watching the show right now, watching us live, hit that like button. Seriously, just by hitting that like button, what it does is it tells the YouTube algorithm that this content is worth watching. It'll put it on watch lists. It'll put it in people's recommended feeds. That really helps us out. And on top of doing that, we really appreciate it if you share the video. I was just telling John before we started the show that over the last 48 hours, I've gotten like 1,000 new subscribers. Honestly. So what you guys are doing, I know you guys are sharing the video. If you keep doing that, this channel will keep growing and that'll just support us naturally and you won't have to send us any money. So please do that. It's been an immense help. So with that all out of the way, we'll see you guys next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as always. Thanks so much for joining us, those who are joining us live and anybody who's listening to us pre-recorded. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Have a lovely, lovely day.